The last thing my sister ever wrote to me arrived 3 days after her funeral. By then, I had already convinced myself she had died hating me. I almost threw the envelope into the trash. Then I noticed 6 words written in her familiar handwriting. "Emily, please read this alone." My hands froze. For 22 years, my older sister, Claire, had barely spoken to me unless she absolutely had to. She never came to my college graduation. She skipped my wedding. When Mom got sick, Claire handled everything herself and refused my help. Everyone said she was cold. I believed them. But that envelope made my heart pound for reasons I couldn't explain. I slipped it into my purse without opening it. Because somehow, I wasn't ready to learn the truth. People always think sisters are supposed to be best friends. Claire and I were never that story. Growing up, she was brilliant. Straight A's. Captain of the debate team. The girl every teacher adored. I was the messy younger sister who forgot homework, spilled orange juice on school projects, and somehow always found trouble. Dad used to laugh. Claire got the brains. Emily got the heart. Claire never laughed at that joke. She'd simply leave the room. Back then, I thought she believed she was better than me. Now, I'm not so sure. The first time I truly believed she hated me, I was 12. I had been accepted into a regional art competition. It was the biggest moment of my young life. The night before the event, my painting disappeared. We searched everywhere. Nothing. Without it, I couldn't compete. I cried until I couldn't breathe. Then Dad found bits of blue paint inside Claire's bedroom trash can. He looked furious. "Did you destroy your sister's painting?" Claire stared at him. "I didn't." "Then explain this." She didn't. Not one word. Dad grounded her for 2 months. She accepted the punishment without defending herself. I remember screaming at her. "I hate you." She looked straight into my eyes. "I know." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. From that day forward, something between us broke forever. Years passed. Every birthday became awkward. Every Christmas felt forced. If we were in the same room, silence settled between us like another family member. Mom kept trying. "One day you'll understand each other." Neither of us believed her. When Dad died suddenly from a heart attack, I expected grief to bring us together. Instead, it pushed us even farther apart. At the lawyer's office, Claire barely looked at me. The attorney cleared his throat. "Your father left the lake cabin to Claire." I smiled politely. That made sense. She loved that place. Then the attorney continued. "The family home goes to Emily." Claire didn't react. Not even a blink. But I noticed her hands tighten into fists. Outside the office, I finally lost my patience. "So that's it?" She looked confused. "What? You got what you wanted." "What are you talking about? You've always been Dad's favorite." For the first time in years. She laughed. Except it wasn't happiness. It sounded broken. "If that's what you believe." She walked away before finishing the sentence. I watched her leave, angry all over again. Mom's health began declining only 6 months later. Early Alzheimer's. The diagnosis shattered us. I offered to move her into my home. Claire interrupted immediately. "I'll take care of Mom. You don't have to do this alone." I said I'll handle it. "You never let anyone help." She looked exhausted. "You don't understand." "There you go again." Mom reached across the table and grabbed both our hands. "Please." Her voice trembled. "When I'm gone, promise me you'll love each other." Claire looked down. I looked away. Neither of us answered. Mom quietly started crying. Over the next 4 years, Claire became Mom's full-time caregiver. She stopped traveling. She quit her marketing career. She disappeared from birthdays, vacations, and almost every family gathering. Whenever relatives praised her sacrifice, she'd shrug. It's temporary. Whenever they praised me for visiting every weekend, Claire would quietly leave the room. I assumed she couldn't stand being around me. Looking back, maybe I never asked the right questions. The phone rang at 5:42 one rainy Tuesday morning. I knew before answering. Hospitals never call with good news before sunrise. Is this Emily Carter? Yes. I'm very sorry. Everything after those 3 words became a blur. Claire had been killed instantly by a drunk driver while driving home after buying groceries. She was only 46. At the funeral, people stood in line telling stories I had never heard. Claire paid my rent when I lost my job. She secretly funded my son's college books. She volunteered every Saturday. None of it sounded like the woman I thought I knew. Who was this person? Had everyone mistaken someone else for my sister? Or had I spent my entire life misunderstanding her? Then, just as the service ended, a gray-haired woman I'd never seen before touched my shoulder. You must be Emily. Yes. She handed me a sealed envelope. Claire asked me to give you this only after the funeral. I stared at my own name written across the front. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. The woman whispered one sentence before walking away. She prayed you'd finally know the truth. My hands began to shake. And for the first time since I was 12 years old, I wondered if my sister had never hated me at all. I sat in my car outside my house for almost an hour, staring at the envelope. My fingers traced Claire's handwriting over and over. I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. In every version, the letter was full of blame. She would tell me how selfish I had been. How I had disappointed her. How she never wanted to see me again. Instead, when I finally unfolded the pages, the very first sentence stole the air from my lungs. Emily, if you're reading this, then I ran out of time. I hope you'll let me tell you the truth before you decide how to remember me. Tears blurred the ink. I know you believed I hated you since you were 12. I never blamed you for that. I blamed myself for staying silent. I swallowed hard. The next paragraph answered the question that had haunted me for 30 years. I didn't ruin your painting. My heartbeat quickened. Dad found blue paint in my trash because I had picked up your torn canvas after I caught someone else destroying it. I stopped breathing. Someone else? Claire continued. It wasn't an accident. Mom had a terrible migraine that afternoon. She became confused, thought the painting was an old piece of cardboard, and cut it into pieces before throwing it away. When I saw what happened, I cleaned everything before you came home. I couldn't bear to let you see Mom crying over what she'd done. My hands shook violently. Mom had destroyed my painting? No. It couldn't be. Dad already suspected something was wrong with Mom's memory. She begged him not to tell anyone. He made me promise to protect her until the doctors had answers. When he accused me, I chose to stay quiet because exposing the truth would have broken her heart. I covered my mouth. The memory rushed back. Dad's angry face. Claire standing silently. My own voice screaming, I hate you. And Claire whispering, I know. She had accepted my hatred to protect Mom. I began sobbing so hard I couldn't finish reading. When I finally calmed down, I turned the page. You deserved the truth years ago. But after enough time passed, I didn't know how to tell you without making you feel guilty. Guilty. That word crushed me. Because guilt was exactly what I felt. The next morning, I drove to the old lake cabin Dad had left to Claire. The lawyer had already given me the keys after her funeral. The place looked untouched. Her boots still sat by the front door. A coffee mug rested beside an open book. It felt as though she might walk in at any moment and smile awkwardly before asking if I wanted tea. Instead, the cabin answered with silence. As I wandered through the living room, I noticed dozens of storage boxes stacked neatly against one wall. Each one had a handwritten label. Emily, age 13. Emily, college. Emily, wedding. Confused, I opened the first box. Inside were newspaper clippings of every art contest I had entered. Every certificate. Every school photo. Programs from high school plays. Even a faded ribbon from the county fair. My throat tightened. Claire had saved everything. I opened another box. There were printed emails. Photos I had posted online. Birthday cards I had sent our parents. One envelope contained every Mother's Day drawing I had made as a child. On top was a sticky note. She'll probably throw these away someday. I'll keep them safe. Signed, Claire. I sank onto the wooden floor. Why? I whispered into the empty room. Why would you keep all this? Behind me, an older man's voice quietly answered. Because she adored you. I spun around. A man in his late 60s stood in the doorway holding a tackle box. I didn't mean to scare you, he said gently. I'm Frank. I owned the cabin next door. I recognized him from the funeral. You knew Claire? He smiled sadly. For nearly 20 years. He noticed the open boxes and nodded. I figured you'd find those eventually. You knew about these? I helped her carry them here. I stared at him. She told me my sister hated me. Frank frowned. No, Emily. Then why did she stay away from me? His eyes filled with sorrow. Because every time she saw you, she felt she'd failed you. I couldn't understand. Failed me how? Frank sat across from me. The day your father died, Claire found a letter he'd written. My heart skipped. A letter? He admitted something he'd regretted his whole life. Frank reached into his tackle box and carefully removed another sealed envelope. He asked Claire to give this to you after he was gone. I stared at the familiar handwriting. Dad's. But, she never gave it to me. Frank looked down. She wanted to. What stopped her? He hesitated. Then spoke so quietly I almost missed it. The same week your father died. Claire was diagnosed with breast cancer. The room tilted. No. She didn't tell anyone except me. I felt my knees weaken. She spent years caring for your mother while secretly going through surgeries, chemotherapy, and radiation. I remembered all the family gatherings she had skipped. The vacations she never joined. The excuses. I'm busy. I have work. I can't make it. They hadn't been excuses. She had been fighting for her life. Alone. Frank looked toward the lake before continuing. She made me promise never to tell you. Why? His voice cracked. Because she wanted you to keep living your life, instead of watching hers fall apart. I broke down again, tears pouring freely. Everything I believed about my sister was collapsing. The woman I thought was cold had spent decades protecting everyone else, our mother, our father. Even me. Frank gently placed Dad's unopened letter into my hands. I think Claire wanted you to read this next. I stared at the envelope. One letter had changed everything. But somehow, I knew the next one was about to change even more. For several minutes, I couldn't bring myself to open Dad's letter. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. It carried years of silence, mistakes, and words that had never been spoken. Finally, with trembling hands, I unfolded it. My sweet Emily, it began. If you're reading this, then Claire finally found the courage to give you my letter. If she waited, don't blame her. That was never her burden to carry. It was mine. A tear landed on the page. You spent your whole life believing I loved Claire more. The truth is, I leaned on her because I was weak. I could almost hear Dad's voice. When your mother first began forgetting things, Claire was only 16. She became my partner instead of my daughter. She helped me hide Mom's illness because your mother begged us not to frighten you. I stole Claire's childhood, and she never complained. My chest tightened. You always saw me praising Claire for being responsible. What you never saw was how often she cried after everyone went to bed. I covered my face. How had I missed all of it? Dad continued. Every time you thought Claire ignored you, she was protecting someone. Sometimes your mother. Sometimes me. Sometimes you. The final paragraph nearly broke me. If I failed as a father, it wasn't because I loved one daughter more than the other. It was because I asked one child to carry burdens that belonged to an adult. I hope someday you'll forgive both of us. I folded the letter carefully and held it against my heart. For the first time in my life, I understood my sister. And I realized I had never truly known her. Frank walked me to the porch. Before I left, he handed me one last item, a small brass key. Claire told me you'd know when to use this. I have no idea what it opens. He smiled sadly. You will. Back inside the cabin, I searched every room. Then I noticed an old wooden desk in Claire's bedroom. Its bottom drawer had a tiny keyhole. The brass key fit perfectly. Inside was a leather journal. Tucked into the cover was one final note. If you've found this, it means you've read the letters. Now I need one last favor. I opened the journal. It wasn't a diary. It was a scrapbook of dreams. Every page held sketches, notes, and plans. One page was filled with photos of my paintings from childhood. Another contained newspaper clippings from local art exhibits. Then I found a page titled Emily's Gallery. Underneath, Claire had written, "She doesn't know she's good enough yet. One day she will." I stared at the words through blurred eyes. There were floor plans for a small art studio. Budgets. Grant applications. Letters to local business owners. Even a savings account statement. The balance made me gasp. Claire had spent 15 years quietly saving money. For me. A paper clipped to the final page explained everything. If I don't survive, use this money to open your studio. Promise me you'll stop doubting yourself the way I doubted I deserved to be your sister. My knees gave out. I cried harder than I had at her funeral. Not because she was gone. Because I had wasted so many years believing the exact opposite of the truth. Months passed before I found the strength to honor her wish. On a quiet Saturday morning, the doors of Claire and Emily Art Studio opened for the first time. I almost named it after myself. Then I remembered who had believed in the dream first. Children filled the classroom that afternoon. Some came from families who couldn't afford art lessons. So I didn't charge them. Claire would have liked that. On the studio's front wall hung a framed photograph of the two of us as little girls. It was the only picture where we were both laughing. Beneath it, I placed a simple plaque. For the sister who loved me quietly until I finally learned how to listen. A year later, an elderly woman walked into the studio carrying a little girl by the hand. "This is my granddaughter," she said. "She lost her mother last year. She barely speaks anymore." The little girl stood silently, staring at the paintbrushes. I knelt beside her. "You don't have to talk," I said with a smile. "Sometimes colors speak first." For the first time, she looked up at me. There was fear in her eyes. The same fear I used to carry. I handed her a blank canvas. She painted for nearly 2 hours without saying a word. When she finished, she hugged me tightly. Her grandmother whispered, "She hasn't hugged anyone since the funeral." I looked at Claire's photograph on the wall. In that moment, I understood something she had known all along. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in sacrifices no one notices. In dreams quietly protected. In letters written too late. And in sisters who spend a lifetime loving you, even when you're convinced they never did. Every Sunday morning, before opening the studio, I place fresh white lilies beneath Claire's picture. Then I smile and whisper the words I should have said years ago. I'm sorry. Thank you. I love you, Claire. And somehow, for the first time in my life, those words finally feel heard.